Good afternoon, welcome back to the Celluloid History Life is a Mystery channel. My name is Dan Rowlands, and a special welcome to fans of the Kildares, Rebecca Fishpond, Open Up, and last but not least, Emergency Exit. Yes, welcome back everybody, welcome back to the channel. PMQs today, and it seems to me that all the political sort of correspondence and mainstream channels, as they say, sort of, are on their excitement peaks a little bit on PMQs Day. It's a big showbiz day for UK politics, which does seem to me to be becoming kind of a slightly more showbiz. Are our lives increasingly being lived out on screens, whether large or small? That's a question to think about, isn't it? I was watching. I watched, as is my usual want. I sort of checked out BBC Daily Politics before, working with my stylist, and then getting ready to go on air with Celluloid History Life's a Mystery channel. And the usual presenter was there, Vicky Young. BBC's Vicky Young, and in the studio today they had just find my notes. So they had a guy called John Roberts, like leader of a businessman, big businessman, leader of big business. Presumably he's got wedged up, basically. You know what I mean? CEO of AO World, John Roberts, who's like a sort of down to earth northern fella, And they had, representing the government, they had Her Majesty's government, His Majesty's government even. They had Rachel Blake, MP. And they also had Rin Ap, I'll try and pronounce his surname. I think it's Rin Ap Yorith. I'll have to look that up and make sure I've got that right for future videos. The guy for the leader from Plaid Cymru in the studio. And they also had a recent graduate who's having trouble finding a job. So there was a sort of general point near the beginning of the show that along the lines of it's difficult to get a job at the moment, and they seem to be saying that apparently what came out of that discussion about young people looking for a job was that they're a risk for employers to employ because they're a bit of an unknown quantity and all this kind of thing, and one thing that struck me, one general point that I was going to make at the start of this of the bulletin today was I've already spoken in previous videos about how as far as I'm concerned, I'm a social democrat, and how the couplet social and democrat covers a lot of bases. But I was going to make a general point about my experience of employment is that my work history has sort of led me to become a social democrat, if you like, because as I've touched on in previous videos, there's always this kind of juxtaposition between what you might call big business and employee rights and stuff, and my experience of the workplace, if you like, is that the small man, so to speak, or let's say, that sounds a bit patronising, doesn't it? But I'm on the side of the working man, and the way everything tends to be rigged is sort of in favour of in favour of big business, in favour of the big man, so to speak, And I mean, I get, as I touched on in previous videos, I get the idea that big corporations, big business have to, entrepreneurs have to be able to do their thing, and businesses have to be able to start in order for jobs to occur in the first place. I do get that, but I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, there's more. The small man makes up more of the population than the big man, doesn't it? The big business, if you like. So, yeah, that's just an observation of why I'm a social democrat, basically. But yes, this guy, what was his name? John Roberts, CEO of AO World, was accusing the Labour government representative, Rachel Blake. He was saying that the government is more interested in optics than outcomes. I've not had a chance to Google the word optics yet, but I think it means I think the general idea is, sort of more interested in surface image than they are in actual, hands-on practical stuff, actually, doing stuff, getting things done, more kind of thing, more interested in the superficials, which of course the Rachel Blake heartily refuted, yeah, it was quite, as I say, it was quite it was a bit more sort of lively than yesterday, probably because it's Prime Minister's questions today, which is something I'll touch on that a bit later. Yeah, they had there was a few general points made. I mean, this John Roberts guy, was kind of coming at things from a sort of brass tacks kind of business sensibility sort of angle. They tend to have one or two in someone who represents business on Question Time, for example, don't they? Because I think the idea is that someone who's actually running a business is more, but to speak frankly, sort of speaks more truth than someone who's I was going to say professional politician. Then I suppose they all are in a sense, aren't they? But was that is Freudian slip's the wrong word, isn't it? I don't know, but isn't that to do with strange things about your mother, Freudian slips? I don't know, but anyway, is that a political Freudian slip to say a professional politician? The idea that all politicians are professionals, but they're not supposed to be, are they? There's a sort of tradition of being supposed to be a stand-up guy or a stand-up woman, a statesperson, aren't you? As well as doing it for the filthy lucre, Anyway, so yeah, this John Roberts represented big business on the Daily Politics today, and he was making the point that talking sort of cold, hard facts about business, and he was saying one of the things about society at the moment is apparently those mobility vehicles that disabled people use. Apparently, a quarter of them are actually purchased by the government for people, and apparently that is the amount of them being purchased by the government has doubled since before the pandemic. Now, the point he was making there was, what's going on in society. There seems to be a rapid increase in dysfunction over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, of course, by some strange quirk of fate, it could be that the truth could be that there are more and more UK citizens that are immobile and need a mobility vehicle. There could be other explanations for it than other than dysfunctionality, I suppose you could argue. I mean, it could be just a sign of an increase in a civilized attitude, I suppose you could argue, because it may have been the case that prior to the pandemic, there were people who needed a mobility vehicle that were having to make do with crutches or limping or what, you know what I mean. But yeah, quite an interesting point. I mean, I think he was sort of making the point that it tends to be an argument from the right of centre, doesn't it? That there's too many people on benefits, not enough people working, etc. So that was quite interesting, yeah. And he was also making the point that he actually used the example of sorry, I'm jumbling my words up a bit there. He was talking about A&E and saying that basically was saying if people had to pay, say, £25 or £30 for an A&E consultation, they might think twice, And he was, before they sort of go to A&E with something that doesn't really need A&E, He made the rather sweeping general point that most people will quite easily spend £25, £30 on beer and cigarettes, that gets them to A&E, if you like. You might spend more than that, mightn't you? But I won't go into my misspent youth. But no, I'm joking, of course. He was sort of making the point that the way he ended up sort of summarising it was true shifts in society, if you like, occur through economic incentive. So, in other words, he was making the point that people are going to think twice before they waste A&E's time if they have to pay, basically, And I mean, that, to be honest with you, a lot of my employment background, as I've said in previous videos, is working for the NHS and also private healthcare companies. Basically middlemen supervised by social services in the NHS, because a lot of it's been privatised, hasn't it? The way the health service works in the UK. I mean, the care company I worked for 6 or 7 years, it used to have to sort of bid for contracts with other companies. It's quite sad, really, isn't it? That, I suppose. But anyway, depends how you look at it. But I mean, I was, the point I was rather ramblingly getting to was regarding stuff like the prospect of putting people off wasting A&E's time by making them pay for the service. It struck me that when the Attlee government implemented the Great British NHS after the Second World War, you can only presume there was a far more sort of strong spirit of communality, if you like, at that juncture in British history, can't you? Really, sort of. The nation was on a high after the stress of 5 Years' War and etc. And there would have been a feeling of sort of natural unity at that point, wouldn't there? And in that sense, I mean, my initial sort of thought was, as a lifelong Labour voter, was the idea of having to pay for any health service is sort of against my instincts. I think the NHS is one of the best things about British culture in many ways, you could say. But my older brother worked for the NHS for many years. My late mother worked for the NHS for many years as a senior physiotherapist. And so yeah, I mean, it's my instinct is it ought to stay free. It's just you know, other stuff ought to be tweaked in order to make it function better, you know. But having said that, I would have to concede that where the UK is at the moment is a very different place from that social high that would have relief, if you like, that would have been the case in 1945, isn't it? You know, at the moment we've got all these questions about immigration, high immigration numbers. We've got these sort of questions about multiculturalism. Has that worked? We seem to be going more towards recently. You know, we seem to be going more towards ideas of integration. I mean, quite frankly, this thing about immigration is kind of a real old political football at the moment, isn't it? You know, it's kind of you know, as I was saying the other day, you've got the NHS as a political football, you've got the immigration as a massive political football now, and you've got sadly you've got paedophilia, which I might add. The Honourable leader of the opposition, Kimi Badenoch, brought up today in her ding-dong she was having with Starmer during PMQs, which was fairly lowbrow stuff, if you ask me. But there you go. I'll come to that a bit later. So I suppose did I end up making my point? Yeah, the point I was making was I do accept that we're not that the mood of the UK currently is not the same as the mood of the UK would have been in 1945 when there was an Attlee government, a Labour, a famously popular Labour government under Clement Attlee, and you know, there was free NHS. I mean, I appreciate the NHS does need you know, desperate work doing on it to improve it for both people that work in it and the people that use it, you know. There's no doubt about that. And of course, wages don't grow on trees, do they? And neither does sophisticated medical equipment, of course. It also costs a lot of money, doesn't it, you know? I mean, the subject of preventative medicine, if you like, preventative healthcare came up today. I mean, obviously, prevention is better than the cure. You know, prevention is better than cure. Ultimately, that's a fact, isn't it? Really, but yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's somewhat. Some might say, to quote Liam Gallagher, that if you had to live in this crazy current UK culture, you'd smoke tabs and drink Stella Artois to get through the working week, you know. So which in turn affects your health, and you haven't got time to cook, so you're having a pot noodle for your tea. But you know, and you're not getting enough exercise. All these things impact, don't they? You know. So I'm giving away my previous life as a student nurse, aren't I? There, but. Hats off to nurses, as I made that point the other day. Not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination, you know. As no doubt being a doctor isn't either, you know. So yeah, I made a point, didn't I, that there appears to be sort of both Labour and Tories. Not so many years ago, used to sort of talk about multiculturalism, didn't they, as a sort of UK strategy for the fact that there's many different races of people living in the UK. There seems to be a sort of the idea. There seems to be more of a push towards the idea of integration, and at the moment. I mean, one of the things that came up today, Rachel Blake was having to defend, was that apparently the Home Secretary, the Asian lady whose name is it Mahmood? Mrs. Mahmood, that's right, Mrs. Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has come out with some statements about how immigrants are going to have what she termed A-level standard English if they want to get a job. And Rin Yorith quite helpfully pointed out that what the heck does that mean? What does A-level standard English mean? A-level English is English literature, isn't it? I mean, so whoever's come up with that term is a bit misguided. There's A-level English doesn't bear any relation to English language well, it didn't when I was at school. English language only went as far as GCSE level, and then A-level English was basically English literature. You know, I think you can study English language at a higher level, can't you? But A-level English was English literature, as is most, you know, higher education study of English tends to be English literature. You know, studying plays and novels, poetry, etc. So, I mean, yeah, Rin Yorith from Plaid Cymru actually, as he said, you know, he said, I haven't got A-level English. What do you mean? You know, so I don't know who's come up with that, but but anyway, the relation that has towards the point about a move towards integration rather than multiculturalism is that it's Labour. Well, they got accused of it today. You know, it's Labour. They got accused of dog whistle politics because it's another case of. I was talking yesterday about how influential Nigel Farage is on UK politics at the moment and has been for years. It's a case of Labour falling in line with Farage's, UK dominance, if you like, of politics, of domestic politics, and sort of making the suggestions that the ultimate aim is that we must be English. I mean, Rin Yorith made the point that he hopes that if in relation to Wales, that would basically mean immigrants would have to learn Welsh in the areas in the workplaces that use Welsh as the first language, which is a fair enough point. A point you would definitely expect a leader of Plaid Cymru to make. I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's still the law that primary school children in Wales have to learn a measure of Welsh. I certainly did, a dipyn bach, which means a little bit. Under the o dan y bwrdd means under the table. Strange the phrases you remember, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. So, anyway, unfortunately, I've forgotten most of my Welsh. I'll have to go for some night classes. Yeah, it's an idea for the future, that. So, yeah, the idea is, yeah, as I say, we'll move towards integration from multiculturalism, maybe. But, I mean, politics is so febrile at the moment. There are certain political commentary quarters that seem to be in love with that word at the moment. Politics is so febrile, aka feverish, at the moment that everything's. It's like loads of balls being juggled in the air at the moment, really, isn't it? I mean, it's amazingly we're miles away from. We're a long way away from the next general election. Although there are people on the right claiming that if the government, can't be seen to be doing a better job soon, that there could be calls for an earlier election back. I very much doubt it. I think it'd have to be some sort of no confidence thing, wouldn't it? Anyway, but that's that's just an attack from the right on the government, really. But yeah, everything's certainly up in the air. Many different issues, The China thing came up in PMQs. That was the main thing. I'm aware that we're over the 20-minute mark. So I've had a few videos at the 27-minute mark. I don't really want to go much over that, but so we'll maybe save some material for tomorrow, But yeah, the thing about the Chinese spy case came up in PMQs, and the BBC correspondent was saying that Badenoch did not really do a particularly good job of sort of questioning Starmer on it. Henry Zeffman, the guy's called from the BBC, the chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. I mean, she got quite passionate about it. I think someone must have had a word in her ear to sort of, you know, try and come across a bit meaner. You know, she sounded a bit scary at some point. Raised her voice and sort of, you know, sounded quite sinister at some point. But apparently, the opinion of our man, chief political correspondent Zeffman, Henry Zeffman, was that she didn't really land any knockout blows, you know, in terms of the questioning. And Starmer handled it quite well. Of course, he's an ex-lawyer, isn't he? You know, and he got accused of not being a leader and not knowing the law. And then he said to her, you're clearly neither leader nor lawyer because you don't know what you're talking about, you know, sort of blah, 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 blah. But I think that's one that's going to sort of roll on. The Tories, there was a fella called Richard Holden in the studio following PMQs, and he was getting quite vociferous and sort of agitated, and with Lisa Nandy, the culture secretary, the government rep, he was getting quite sort of aerated, shall we say, about this, the fact that the Tory line is that there's been some sort of cover-up and that they're scared of China, you know, they're too weak to stand up to China. That's the line that the Tories are going down. And the Labour line is that basically the administrative goings-on in question to do with this case happened while they were in power, while the Tories were in power. So, you know, that they need to sort of look at their own government records rather than accusing Labour of anything. You know, it's a bit kind of, for the man in the street, it's a little bit sort of, you know, in-house kind of in terms of the two main parties. I mean, let's say Reform's the main party now, of course, don't they? But certainly is in the polls, isn't it? Yeah, it came across a bit sort of, yeah, like sort of, you know, the squabbles that have been going on between Labour and Tories since year dot, you know, for the last 100 years kind of thing, you know, since the Whigs went extinct. Do you remember them? You know, and a political party that went extinct. Now, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Mr. T's quiet today because he's, well, in actual fact, he was getting a bit aerated earlier on, but we've had to move him to a different area of the premises. But we still haven't got the ransom money, so you know, we'll have to. I'll keep you informed about what's happening with Mr. T anyway. But he's in an inaudible location of the premises at the moment, so watch this space regarding Mr. T. But I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to wish everybody a good Wednesday evening. Have a great Wednesday evening, middle of the week. I hope your week's going well. Remember the big football match on Sunday, won't you? Manchester United versus Liverpool. 4:30, and I believe the match is at Anfield. And yes, you know, and the question is, I was talking about football references yesterday. You know, can Starmer get the dressing room of the British electorate back on side? You know, these are, I think we should be told. You know. Or is he going to carry on scoring own goals? You know, you get the picture, don't you? Poor old football, you know. But yeah. But as always, look after yourselves. I think the channel will be back tomorrow. I won't give a specific time, but as always, always end your political bulletins by making sure you slow down the pace of the words towards the end to give them more emphasis. Have a good night. Good night.